Cool. So, welcome to another Abstract Amoeba. Today, obviously, we're going to be talking about cultural appropriation. It's a hot topic. I know that on one hand, you got some people that would say cultural appropriation is unacceptable. On another, some people say it's not so bad, and we're going to sort of explore that today and see where we go from there. But I think I'll just start off with, hey, why couldn't Idris be Bond?
Straight into it, yeah.
Hard hitting, man. Hard
Yeah,
talk.
man.
Why couldn't Idris Elba be Bond? So, for me, from our last conversation, we were talking a lot about the importance of representation and, the importance of the stories that we tell. And, Mike made some good points. And I think, me personally, I don't have a problem with Idris Elba or a black person playing Bond. What I have an issue with is tell another story. Find another story to tell that's just as good, just as engaging, or better. That you could place a black person in, rather than feeling the need to get validation by consuming and taking over another brand or another iconic figure. Create your own icons. That would be my initial thought on it. Keeping it short as it is. Hamza, what about you?
I can't speak for everyone that wants Idris Elba to play Bond. Most people I've spoken to, they aren't actually Bond fans. They just want to see the change. So if Idris is now cast as Bond, they might not even necessarily watch the film because they don't have any connection to the Bond franchise.
Yeah,
I do agree with Tunde. I think that personally, I would like to see a new franchise with Idris Elba in a spy-like character. If that's what you want to do, not everyone might not agree with me. Personally, Bond, I get that he's an institution to lots of people. He's a character that's been around for generations and stuff like this. Whether or not I like him, that's besides the point. But for me personally, there's things about Bond that I think that are kind of archaic anyway, to some extent. Yeah. I get it. The last few movies have tried to bring him into the 21st century. But there is a lot of his history that is kind of still in where he was, where he was formed, the character was formed.
I think...
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you, man.
Carry on, man. What are you saying?
Yeah, but what I was going to say is that I think the funny thing is about Bond and the whole idea of representation. I personally don't feel as passionately about Bond being black necessarily. And I think the reason for that is because if you think about the values that the character James Bond holds, essentially James Bond is a vehicle for wish fulfillment. He's not actually a real person. And what I mean by that,
fantasy.
He's in every single Bond film we've seen. He's probably with 2-3 chicks in the same film. That's number one. Number two, killing with abandon. He's got a license to kill, so it doesn't really matter. 3, okay, yes, he wears the Omega watch. He jet sets. He jet skis. He can go on boats. He wears all the best
profiling.
Exactly. He wears the best suits.
If you got it, better flown.
Exactly. And the point is, the way I see it is, look, this is just a vehicle for wish fulfillment. This is, to use the Freudian term, this is not a real person. This person doesn't really have much value apart from Queen and Country, apart from the fact that he is patriotic. And hey, I don't care if the person, the protagonist of Bond is white or black. You can have a black patriot, you can have a white patriot. I don't really care, because really and truly, Bond's values, I don't really connect to them. Yes, okay, you can kind of go along with that, that wish fulfillment moment. Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could jump into a Aston Martin tomorrow? But I mean, jokes aside, that is what it is.
Yeah, like the thing is, I like that point about wish fulfillment, because especially I've read the Bond books and I've seen all the films.
Ooh.
There's always going to be one of those guys.
Yeah, always trying to flex, man.
It's going to be one of those guys. But Bond is essentially he is the dream of the fallen British Empire. He's the dream that Britain still has international clout in the age of the Cold War. You know, he's the dream that Britain is still the great international superpower, even despite its, you know, island size and its location. Yes.
Are we placing too much philosophical baggage on James Bond? I tell you why. I tell you why. Yeah, because I feel like maybe he was initially, but I don't know. Is that what Fleming was thinking? Was Fleming thinking?
No.
Wasn't Fleming?
So I don't think
he was an actual spy, right?
He was a spy. He was a spy. So I don't think Fleming was intentionally going, I'm going to create something that's going to be a metaphor for Britain's, state in the world. I think what he did is that he created something that really tapped into what the people of that time wanted to feel, which was in the midst of the Cold War, they wanted to feel Britain was still pulling strings and making waves, right? Bond is very much of its time, and it's more out of a sense of kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say loyalty, but habits that we watch Bond. It's just become a habitual thing that we watch, and the franchise had to evolve to become relevant. Yeah, exactly, and it's had to evolve to become relevant. It, like Mike's saying, it wouldn't actually affect me personally if a Black, Indian, Chinese person played Bond, right? But it would annoy me because there's so many more stories that you can tell, so many more things you can do, rather than just focusing on this. And it almost feels like scrambling for the scraps of what people hold great, like trying to find value by taking over what other people value rather than creating something of worth yourself.
Here's the thing though, in a sense, would you then say that Bond is a kind of reverse cultural appropriation? Because oftentimes cultural appropriation is this idea that it's the West that takes from, the East, or, takes from other parts of the world to create culture. Yeah, that's the idea. It's the idea of like the center taking from the periphery. Okay,
yeah.
Or and the way I see it is then this decision to make blonde Bond is this decision to make Bond black. Is that a kind of reverse cultural appropriation?
I hear what
does that
you're
make
saying.
sense? Or can
Yeah. It's almost like putting a black guy on the main stage, if you will. Because I mean, Bond is pretty big. The movies still make a lot of money. It's still an event to some degree. So if you put a black actor in the epicenter of this, it's like, oh, see how far we've come as a race. Now one of ours is Bond. So again, going back to what Tane said, personally, I'd rather see a modern spy movie or whatever you want to call it, or franchise. I mean, there's so much baggage in history with Bond anyway. Would you really want that on you as well? And I would rather see Idris in a role that he can actually make his own, because he still has to be within the confines of the Bond mythos, if that makes any sense. He can't do anything that's too out of character for Bond. So I'd rather see something new.
Anyway, I prefer Luther to
same.
Some of the Bond iterations anyway.
Yeah, Luther is actually really cool. It's original.
But what I was going to say though, in terms of like cultural appropriation, speaking as an artist and an art teacher, I would say that to some degree, cultural appropriation is a very strange idea. In that, I wonder why people get so wound up about it. I think I know why, but if you're thinking about art, art is about appropriation, especially contemporary art, especially if we're talking about, whether it be the pop artists that kind of came on the scene in the 1960s, whether it be modern day pop artists, whether it be people like, Basquiat, or whether it be people like Rosenkist, all these kind of artists, they draw from popular culture. They draw from other cultures to create something new. Okay, in a way, it's like a pastiche. You're taking things from other elements to make something brand new. appropriation is a thing in art. It's an actual process. The way I see it is, then it almost, for me, feels a bit silly to say that you're offended by that. That's how we create culture. We create culture by drawing from other people's cultures to create something brand new. And so if you're going to be offended and say, oh, I don't agree with cultural appropriation, I wonder if we're hampering the actual creative process.
I think so. I guess there's a question there about, respect and reference and things like that. I think you have every right to feel.
Or is it just about equity, though, Tunde? Is it simply just about equity?
Yeah, but who do you pay? Who do you give the respect to? Like, that being said, though, I think respect is important, and obviously you have to. But it's the thing: who do you credit? Do you credit the whole country? It gets weird. Yeah. Because the thing is, look, again, as an artist, I have found source of inspirations from everywhere, whether it's Japanese culture or I don't know, Chinese or whatever the case may be, right? There's other places I get my sources of inspiration from. I always try and do it in a respectful way. I don't turn people into caricatures and stuff like this, like the early Warner Brothers cartoons would do when they would depict, Japanese soldiers and stuff. We all know what I'm talking about here. So I don't do anything like that. That being said, we don't live in little bubbles. We're on a global stage here. So say if you're a white person now and you live in a predominantly black area and you're a photographer or you're a visual artist, right? Those things will influence you. The sounds, the music, the food, all those things. And your art is merely a mirror that you're holding up to the things around you, if that makes any sense. So then, just as you said, Mike, how can you be offended by that? Unless the guy is going out of his way to be offensive. And sometimes some of these things are just benign, that things that people get offended by. It's just like, you're just reflecting what you see. So how can you get upset by that?
But I do think it might be a question of equity. It might be a question of the fact that the West, or the nations in the middle, let's say, are making more money from the cultures that are on the periphery, and so they are benefiting financially, from another's culture. Now that's probably what irks some people. But then it goes back to what you said, Hamza. Who do you pay exactly? Or does it not matter? That would you kind of appease the sort of anti-cultural appropriation crowd by saying, okay, well, the recipient of the financial rewards of this project or this creative pursuit is a black person? Would that appease those individuals?
I don't know. Like, I was going to bring up this. Do you remember when Jamie Oliver tried to make jollof rice?
Wow. And I think he also made jerk rice?
Yeah, he jerk rice as well. Rice. Yeah. And obviously everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people were. And to be clear, I saw those recipes. I'm not touching. But but in a way, I get it. Like, ultimately, the world it's so easy to communicate and share information. The world is ultimately moving towards this thing where our cultures are just going to smash together and intermingle. Jamie Oliver making jollof rice doesn't annoy me, and it shouldn't annoy anybody. It should be celebrated that somebody is trying to put a spotlight on, a particular culture's food or whatever. I guess what should be annoying, or what I did find annoying, is the fact that he didn't pay any attention to the ingredients or the recipe or
exactly that. And I think that's what got people upset, because it's like, but that's not jollof rice. It's just by name, if you know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I get it. I think if you're going to say that, okay, let's say I'm Jamie Oliver and I want to make ackee and saltfish. Yeah. But I use chicken. It's like, well, that's not ackee and saltfish. That's ackee and chicken, right?
So yeah, but in that same way, shouldn't everyone in India be upset about how we eat chicken tikka masala?
Yeah.
You know, or spaghetti bolognese. It's like these things have been appropriate.
Wait, hold on, wait. So India created spaghetti bolognese?
Well, no, it is.
Okay.
I'm sure somebody there would claim it though. I'm sure somebody there would.
They
claim
made
it.
bangers and mash as well.
Hey man, I think those people in Italy are going to be pretty upset to hear that, man.
But yeah, even to a certain extent, like we all know that Italian that's very judgmental about certain things you put on your pizza. You know the type. You know what I'm talking about. So even to a certain extent, you know, they want to take ownership of how their food's been represented. So I think it's just a case of, I think for the most part, it is just acknowledging where you got this thing from or whatever, the concept or the idea, and kind of respecting it. But going back to Jamie Oliver thing, I think it was just mostly that. He just made some random stuff and said it's jollof rice to kind of cater to a certain group.
Yeah, and it seemed like he wasn't respecting the origin of where that thing came from, you know. And because I think, like Mike's saying, I think it's very difficult to pick specific things in artistic expression and then claim cultural appropriation, because everything we experience is layered on top of one another. It's all layered on top of each other. So to dissect it and extract it and say, no, that is cultural, that part is cultural appropriation, while that part isn't, I think is, you know, maybe a little bit naive. If we take something like hip hop, if you remember a few years ago, Azealia Banks made some comments about cultural appropriation, and I think she made it particularly in reference to Iggy Azalea and her music. And things like that, you got to wonder, which is, you know, to Mike's point, is it really about equity? You know, is Azealia Banks have been making those comments if she felt she was receiving more commercial opportunity from her music than another person? But ultimately, where the influence for that music comes from and how it's expressed is very difficult to extract from and dissect and say that one culture owns one specific part of it and another culture owns another. You know, things are just too intermingled to do that, and things will ultimately continue to become incredibly intermingled, even more so.
That's definitely the kind of trajectory that we're heading in, where it is going to be harder to differentiate what is what, if you know what I'm trying to say. With even with Eminem, for example, I guess most people can, and I think this is something he's even said before, how when he was, you know, rising up the ranks in rap, how he kind of wasn't respected because of his skin color and stuff like this. And yes, there is a history of white musicians, Elvis being one, for example, kind of taking black music or black culture. Justin Bieber recently came out as well. I think he gave like a formal apology. And then recently he made a video where he's being kind of very black doing the Harlem Shake and stuff. And that actually got quite a lot of negative backlash, actually, funnily enough. So it's kind of this weird thing where, you know, it's...
But I'm not going to lie, I didn't agree with the Bieber thing. And I'll tell you why. So apparently Justin Bieber, he, I think, took a clip from Martin Luther King's last speech and put it as a skit or something within his album or within a song. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the reason why people didn't agree with it was because they felt that the song had no bearing on the message, or it was maybe contradictory to the message, or it was simply just about his girlfriend or something. And he placed Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech. But the fact of the matter is, Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech is an iconic moment in history, period. It's in human history. And we share human history because we are human beings. And because of the fact that we share human history, why can't Justin Bieber be inspired by and want to use a clip from Martin Luther King Jr., considering, if I'm not mistaken, Justin Bieber considers himself to be a Christian. Martin Luther King Jr., as well as being I think it was like a liberal I think he was a socialist of some persuasion. He was a kind of socialist, but at the same time, he was also a Christian. He was kind of brought up in sort of like Ebenezer Baptist Church. This is what he was all about. And the point is, I don't see why it's an issue for Justin Bieber to mention that. What that tells me is that actually Black people are inspiring and affecting people. Like, we are very much a part of this society. We are very much a part of the human experience. I don't see why people can't then use that for art.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, at some point, there's to appropriate something and use it, surely is just, we have to understand that is just a natural process of creating something. We very seldom create something from absolutely nothing. We draw on different bits and pieces. And as long as you're giving credit to where you're taking that inspiration and that influence from, you can't be really causing harm. Again, it just comes back to this matter of equity, which is that it seems to be the underlying gripe tends to be when one person is making money off of this while another group are not.
No, but it's usually the perceived dominant group is making money.
Yeah.
In opposition to the perceived subjugated group.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why people have an issue with it, especially if historically that group had been subjugated by this other group. But again, we run the risk of kind of making a group of people monolithic. No white person is the same. You've got some white people, within the UK, that come from a working class family. You've got some white people that, you've got some people nowadays that their grandparents and their, great grandparents, helped with during the Second World War or the Great War. And the fact of the matter is, they may not necessarily have bourgeois sensibilities. They may be working class, but you are sort of grouping them in with maybe upper class or middle class Caucasian people. And it's the same thing with Black people. We're not a monolith. You can't say Africa as if every single country in Africa is not distinctive. And not only just every single country, every city within those countries, every parochial area within those cities have a different flavor and a different feel. Every household within those countries has a different flavor, different culture, different feel to the entire continent. So again, I feel we run the risk of kind of making people monoliths. And when you make people monoliths, you kind of, in a sense, you make them symbolic. You, in a sense, dehumanize. And when you dehumanize, it makes it easier to make one an enemy or to make one an adversary when really we're human beings.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, going slightly off topic, it kind of goes back to, I was having this conversation at work. So there's some people, one particular person at work who has some hang-ups about the term Black, being referred to as Black, and the kind of negative connotations that are associated with it. And, I was thinking there is no one consensus on how someone wants to be addressed. If you were to go to America, 9 times out of 10, if I was to walk down the street, someone would say, "Oh, the African American," but I'm not African American. I'm okay with being referred to as a Black British person.
Yeah, you could also be in America. So to cut you, but you could be a Black African American, but you actually have no African heritage.
Yeah, exactly. You could be from Dominica, for example, or whatever, the Dominican Republic, or Cuba, for example, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the problem lies. And again,
even the word Black, anyway, it was it's a political word. I mean, if
Exactly.
we there is a book I believe called, I think it's called Staying Power. If you want to have it's basically talking about the black experience within the UK.
Yeah.
And one of the things it mentions is that it talks about how black was a kind of catch-all, okay, for Afro-Caribbeans, for people from West Africa, or just the continent, for people from India. It was a kind of catch-all.
Yeah.
Okay, just the term black. So even that in and of itself, it is politicized. So I get why some people might be thinking, I have my doubts about the word black and so on and so forth. But hey, we know that words carry baggage. We do know that. Words carry a history. Even within the English language, you have homophones, and so they might have the same word but have differing meanings. That happens. Similarly as well, different definitions attached to that word carry different memories. But I'm sure we can kind of hopefully maybe distance ourselves, or try to maybe not forget, but distance ourselves from some of the definitions that we don't really like.
No, this is true. I think case in point, the term colored. Well, as Tunde knows, someone we know. I think it was like the parents referred to black people as colored.
This guy out.
No, I didn't say any names. And granted, I didn't believe the person that used the term was racist. I don't at all. And I can't. Yes, granted, I can't speak for all black people, but I can imagine a majority of black people don't want to be referred to as colored. Now, in the case of this person, they might not just have enough black people to tell them, "Hey, man, it's
29.
It's cool. It's cool to refer to me as black and stuff like this." But sometimes that's all it takes. It just takes just to ask, are you okay with this? And unfortunately, people, I think, are maybe too scared to do that nowadays. I can only speak for myself. If someone wants to genuinely ask me, is this all right? Hey, man, I'm more than welcome to have a conversation and go, yeah, this is cool. This isn't cool and stuff like this. And I'll do it in a very cool and calm, collective way.
Yeah. But,
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, but, kind of leading with what Mike was saying there about ultimately homogenizing, we have to create labels, because even white is a catch-all for a whole series of ethnicities.
Yeah, it's just shorthand. Yeah.
And similarly with black, if black people weren't called black people, some people would take offense with whatever term is that we ultimately end at. I know recently in the UK there was a review into the term BAME.
Oh,
so black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, BAME, whatever you want to call it. And they're basically saying it should drop that group drop that terminology, because it basically, all right, if you're not white, you're BAME. End.
I think it should be dropped personally, because all of those groups have their own different struggles, their own, throwing them all together is a slippery slope. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And so I was going to say, like, when you have that kind of homogenous block of a culture, I think it makes it easier to extract points from those from the depths of that cultural group, and then pass them off as something else. So, if people are kind of blocked into one group of just BAME, and then you take Scotch bonnet peppers and whatever, you start putting it into your food, and you turn it and you say, oh, this is this. And where's it from? It's from Africa. It's easier to appropriate things from a homogenized block of cultures, and then at the same time, it oversimplifies massively the richness each culture, each locality can bring to the world. We look at, from a very simplistic perspective, we have to call people something, right? But we also have to acknowledge that calling people something, whatever that term is, massively reduces the cultures and their backgrounds and their heritage.
Yeah, I agree
completely. Well, I guess that concludes another episode. Let us know what you think. Do you think that black is too simple a term to refer to a group of people? And what are your thoughts on cultural appropriation? Is this something, do you think that all people have the right to kind of, you know, borrow here and there from cultures? I mean, ultimately we live, you know, we're all neighbors here. Please let us know what you think. And if you like, if you dislike, hey, you're well within your rights to do so. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
See ya. Smash that like button.